Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Six Rings Canes podcast slash YouTube show slash everything you want to know about Miami Hurricanes football and Miami Hurricanes sports in general. Joined by Danny Gillette and Paul Austria today on the show. Thank you guys for joining us. Got a lot of stuff to cover. Just a friendly reminder, we are an extension of the Five Rings Canes podcast. Also, you can catch us not only on YouTube, but when the show's done, if you missed it, you can always catch us on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts, go ahead and check us out there. But in the meantime, if you are watching us live, please go make sure you subscribe to our Five Reasons YouTube channel. Give us a nice thumbs up, and help us out with donations. This is how these guys feed their families, with these little small donations that we have here. No, not really, but it does help out the program. And very soon you will be able to get some Six Rings Canes merchandise also on the Five Rings. On the Five Reasons Sports apparel. Five Reasons Sports Network. .com. What is it? What is it called? FiveReasonsSports.com. Jesus, there's so many everything. FiveReasonsSports.com. You can check the apparel out there. You'll be able to get some cool shirts in multiple colors as well. So we'll do a nice contest giveaway as well for that. So, but without further ado, let's get right into it and talk a little Miami Hurricanes football, spring football in particular. We are coming up to just about 2 weeks away. Well, a little bit more than 2 weeks away from our spring football game, which is April 17th. So yeah, we've actually got about 3 weeks left before we get to that game. Pretty excited about it, though. Been hearing a lot of great things from certain positions at practice, which is nice to hear. But we've also, I guess it wouldn't be a surprise, right, that we've also heard that, we haven't heard much from certain players as well at certain positions, which is at this point no shocker either. So we can kind of dive into it right now. Starting off, I guess we can start with the running back position. Paul and I did a nice little breakdown of the running backs a few weeks back, and we start to see some video come out of practice, and we see certain drills. And to me, this is not concerning, but this is just kind of what you're seeing is what you're going to get in my eyes. And I think you know where I'm going with this, Paul, is on certain drills where you see certain guys running a little bit harder than others or doing the drill a little bit better than others. Primarily, we saw that RPO drill with Tyler Van Dyke handing it off to Cam Harris and him kind of just going through the motions. And then you see Jalen Knighton kind of get the handoff and go, make one cut, go through the hole, go underneath that hurdle, and just explode off the ball. Listen, a lot of people complain that it's just practice and not to read into it, but guys, I want to get your take on this. For me, it's you play how you practice. Bottom line, especially in football, you got to go full speed all the time because you're never going to have a down, I guess you could say, right? Where you're just going to be able to just walk through things. So, Paul, talk to me a little bit about that, and we'll hand it over to Danny after that. What you saw from that, and what you could expect moving forward.
Okay, well, I did see that video come across my timeline. I don't know, because you can kind of you can look at it from different perspectives where Harris is kind of the senior, so he's the more veteran kind of guy, versus Jalen, who is he's still a youngin'. He's still kind of trying to work his way back into the thick of things. He's still recovering from that shoulder injury. And I mean, I don't like making a big deal out of things like that because, after all, it's just one rep that we saw.
Right.
You do have a point, though, where, I'm a big believer, too, where, your habits during games so the habits you practice in practice that will reflect in games. You kind of want to get your habits to be like clockwork. You kind of want things to kind of be more like a muscle memory kind of thing.
Right.
And because what if you're in that when it's the fourth quarter, it's a 3rd-and-1, and you do need that that 1 yard gain, and your body might be freaking out. You may be freaking out physically and mentally, but it's just what your body's been practiced, or what your body's practiced, throughout the week is what will kind of what's the word for it? That will involuntarily happen. So it's I don't want to think of it too much. It is something to look. I guess it is something to kind of also look at as well. But to me, it's not that big of a deal. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's what they do during a game. Like the better player will come about. We'll see who gets the reps in the fourth quarter when it matters most. Are they going to trust Jalen? Are they going to trust Cam? Are they going to trust even Don?
Well,
So
here's the thing for me, right? Like, it's not only about how you do the rep. It's not how you do the rep, Danny, but I think it's also about the coaching staff getting on his ass right then and there and say, hey, you know what I mean? You better run this out full speed or you're going to be number 4 on the depth chart, not number 1, right? I mean, talk to me a little bit about that. Like, would you be, you expect the coach, and maybe obviously we didn't see that, but you expect the coaches to do something like that also, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I was a part of a football team during my 5 years in college, and the coaching staff always made it a point to run hard if you were a wide receiver, get a clean break out of your. I mean, run hard if you were a running back, get a clean break out of your routes if you were a wide receiver. And they always said, practice how you would play in a game. And I saw that video scroll across my timeline as well. And again, I don't really want to make a big deal out of, a practice, a spring practice, but the running back position was a position that sort of underperformed last season. Like, we thought we were going to see more, and we never really did see consistency out of the running back position. So I would like to see them, play and practice harder over these next couple of weeks, and I would like to, see an improvement in the intensity. Again, I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it, but if I was the coach, I would say, these reps mean a lot, especially during spring when a lot of these younger players can make first impressions and many of whom want to play. So, again, I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it, but coming from the running back position where we get a ton of last year as it is kind of concerning.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Another position that actually seems to be showing out. Some of the top guys that we thought, hey, look, they were going to come out and they were going to ball out no matter what. Is the wide receiver position. I think we were excited to see Charleston Rambo coming in, transferring from Oklahoma, but just to see Mike Harley. We saw again another video that's comes by our timeline, and we see him just breaking out and just smoking everybody, and the only one that is even close to him is Tyreek Stevenson, although he may have been playing off of him. Who knows what happened? But the bottom line is that you see him just streaking down the middle of the field and catching that touchdown, and he looked really good. He looks fast. He looks bigger. He looks like he's gained some weight. And then, of course, not only Mike Harley, but I think the emergence of Keyshawn Smith as that, what looks to be that number 3 position, him just going out there and first of all changing numbers, which is kind of nice. Now he's number 5 on the offense, which is cool to see. At first I was like, who is this guy catching passes at with the number 5? But it's Keyshawn Smith at number 5. And not only is he working on, obviously he knows that he's probably going to be one of the fastest guys on the field every time he's on the field, right? So he knows he's that guy that's going to take the top off the defense. But and he owns that, and I love that because he knows that he's that guy. But he's also working on his intermediate routes. You see him running the slant routes and catching those balls. And apparently, he is just putting on a clinic at practice now as well, which is nice to see. Another guy I want to mention, and the reason I'm mentioning all these guys is because I want you guys to speak on them as soon as I turn it over to you. But another guy that we saw making some big plays is Xavier Restrepo. We saw that one highlight of him diving for one of the catches, which looks real nice. And obviously, that's a testament to the quarterbacks making some nice throws also. But Xavier Restrepo, Keyshawn Smith are some of the names that we're seeing that are starting to stand out a little bit in spring football. For me, this is where, and Jock said it the other day, this is where you kind of earn your stripes and get that nod as being the starter, the number 3 guy, or the first guy off the bench, right? Another one, though, on the flip side, no mention from number 6 or number 8 at all yet. So, I mean, we're seeing a running theme here, fellas, right? I mean, we're seeing that, these younger guys are starting to outplay these guys, and that tells you a lot for me at least, it tells me a lot. And for the wide receiver position, no news is bad news. It's not no news is good news, right? So talk to me a little bit about the wide receiver position, what you guys are starting to realize or maybe starting to see a little bit.
I think this is kind of the start of like what they expected from these past two classes of receivers, where I think people kind of felt, maybe coaches too, kind of felt like maybe guys like Mark Pope and D Wiggins maybe getting a little comfortable, just because like they feel like they're gonna win out with their seniority, but they're getting like high caliber, very hungry local guys even to come in and compete, and not just be willing to sit back and redshirt for a year or so. Like, no, they're going to come out and get it, And I think someone alluded to this before where, the fact that even Miami had Keyshawn Smith speak to the media is a big deal. They didn't get D Wiggins. They didn't get Mark Pope. They got Keyshawn Smith. And I feel like right after they brought him up is when a bunch of people started talking about Smith even more. I think that we thought, even what he did last year, it was plenty for a true freshman who didn't even visit campus before he signed. Like I think Diaz visited him like 2 days or 3 days before signing day. Just said, "Hey, we have a spot for you. We've seen your tape. We like you." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm in." So it goes to show you what they think of him. And I think that I don't know. I always felt like he plays bigger than he is. Like he's listed as 6'1", but I feel like he almost plays like he's like 6'3" or 6'4".
And that's still pretty big, though, right? That's not small.
Yeah. No. I've seen him on deep balls, and he can get up there. Like he is very athletic. He has a speed. It's kind of a travesty that he's basically unknown for a while, and it's really good to kind of just see him kind of shining through the cracks. Just to kind of keep, the other guys on their toes. I mean, guys like him, like you mentioned, Charleston Rambo, he's kind of just doing what we expected him to do, and Harley doing his thing. I think Harley talked about how it's kind of just everything's kind of kicking in for him now, where he realizes the kind of impact he has on this team and on the young players as well. That now that if he puts in the work, if he's very I think even Brevin Jordan on his Instagram story posted a picture of Mike's wall or his mirror, and it's basically just all inspirational messages, stuff to kind of keep him kind of mentally focused, which to me I thought was really cool. And and to your point too is there's no mention of 6 or 8 on defense, so you just kind of hope that. We don't know what's going on, obviously, but maybe it's just the younger guys kind of showing their hunger and showing that we're the youngins, but we're still here to make an impact. However how old we are doesn't matter. That we're still wearing that U in our chest and on our helmets, and that they don't care who's in front of them. They're gonna come in and bust their tail off, and compete for playing time. So it's definitely a good thing for a lot of these young names to kind of pop up.
So, Danny, before we get to our special guest, because, by the way, we forgot to mention at the top of the show, but we do have a special guest on the show today. Brad Tajeda is going to be joining us here in the next minute. But before, give me your take on what that says to you that you're not hearing, guys like Mark Pope and D Wiggins, kind of showing out in spring ball. What does that tell you?
That's kind of concerning to me because even if they aren't the most vocal people, I would expect them to be leaders. They are upperclassmen. When we talked about the wide receiver unit last year, 3 names always came up immediately: Pope, Wiggins, and Harley, and they were the focal point of the passing game last year. And even with the opportunity for depth and some new faces like Rambo and Restrepo playing well, I would hope that Pope and Wiggins would at least say something, or at least say something to the media, encouraging their teammates if maybe they don't want to have a long interview or something like that. And the fact that we haven't heard from them, kind of says a lot to me on the leadership side, because I figured we would hear from them by now. I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Brad, we were actually talking, by the way, Brad Tajeda here joins us on the Six Rings Canes show now. We were talking a little bit about spring football, just some of the guys that are starting to, really make some noise. We spoke a little bit about Keyshawn Smith, Xavier Restrepo at the wide receiver position. So we were kind of mentioning those guys. We're also mentioning that there hasn't been a lot of talk of Mark Pope and D. Wiggins really kind of standing out. And at this point in their careers, they should be like Danny said, not necessarily the vocal leaders, but just showing it out on the field. So talk to me about what you feel primarily about what's going on at the wide receiver position as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the wide receiver position, I mean, it's the deepest position on the football team right now, right? I mean, we're up to 12, 13 guys on scholarship as far as the wide receiver room. So when you talk about competition, right, that's the number one position where you look at last year, we only had Mike Harley who kind of stepped up for us. So now this year, adding a transfer in Charleston Rambo, who hopefully could, give some of the slack of what happened with Mike Harley last year, being that only number one guy. And the emergence of, Keyshawn Smith and Xavier Restrepo, like you said, it's going to allow a lot of these guys to where we're going to be able to play these guys in multiple positions on the football field, similar to what we were doing with the striker position last year, right? Where these wide receivers, you look at your potential starting three in Rambo, Harley, and Keyshawn Smith. These are all three young men that can all play the outside, all play the slot, all, run in the motion, run in the backfield, catch off of a screen pass. This is all going to be stuff that is going to be implemented in a Rhett Lashley offense that you would expect to be a lot more fast-paced compared to last year, especially with another full offseason. That's going to be very important. But going back to the receiver room, I know with D. Wiggins, he's been a little bit banged up. I know he hasn't been at practice, so that is probably one reason why you haven't heard D. Wiggins' name. And then as far as Mark Pope, man, it's just we kind of knew, the emergence of Keyshawn Smith, the little glimpses that we saw last year, that Keyshawn Smith, coming into this season along with Xavier Restrepo, were going to be two names to put Mark Pope on the chopping block to where he better get his stuff together. If not, someone's going to pass him. And that's exactly what you're seeing right now. And, as much as we want Mark Pope and D. Wiggins to, kind of evolve into what we wanted, it's a good thing that we're having these, still freshmen, because you got to remember last year was a free year for everybody. It's good to know that we still have freshmen on this football team that are willing to step up and take that next, opportunity. That's something we've been missing a lot, especially in the skill position.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Brad Tajeda from Canes Insight here joining us on the show. I kind of want to flip it over now to a different position. Well, actually, two different positions, and that's really the trenches, guys. And, we've been hearing a lot about the moves that have been made recently on the offensive line. It looks like DJ Scaife has now moved out to the outside to compete with Jarrett Williams at right tackle. And Navon Donaldson sort of cementing himself as that right guard. I think that leaves it open for Jalen Rivers to just come in and completely dominate that left guard position. Not only that, though, we're hearing that the offensive line is a little bit ahead of the defensive line right now, which, I mean, look, we lost two potential, top three rounders, right? Because I don't think Quincy Roche goes in the first round, but he may go, sometime in the third round or so. And then you lose Jalen Phillips on the other side. So obviously losing those two guys, the guys that are coming in and making up for like DeAndre Johnson, Chance Williams, and some of the other guys, it's going to take them maybe a little bit. But, it's good to hear that the offensive line is I guess you would say, dominating practice right now for the most part. Nestor Silvera is obviously not playing much because he's out with that shoulder injury, so you're not seeing him in spring football. But I want to get your take on the trenches, guys. Is this kind of normal? Are we okay with knowing that the offensive line right now is ahead of the defensive line? Whoever wants to kind of jump in on that first. Go ahead, Paul.
I mean, at this point, because we've kind of returned everyone from last year, this kind of should be the expectation. Just because it's now that the Navon Donaldson's back. I mean, Lashley called him a people mover, yesterday or today, and he's at 6'6", 345, and he's kind of in better shape, I think, compared to seasons past. And now that we're kind of, I guess we're finding that right combination of players that, at least on the line, that would definitely help us win. It's definitely a great sign. And, like you mentioned, the defensive line, there's still a lot of young guys. A lot of names you mentioned are mostly just outside of DeAndre Johnson. These guys are freshmen and sophomores. Like you guys like Cam Williams, Chance Williams, Jafari Harvey. Those guys are still relatively young. Harvey played a bit last year, but, he didn't play. It was mostly just Phillips and Roche the whole time. So it's kind of the expectation. And with the offensive line, now I feel like there's solid competition. Like you mentioned, Scaife even mentioned that he feels like right tackle is his more natural position compared to guard. And you still have Jared Williams there, who's like a seventh year senior or whatever. And
Like
also,
40, he's like 40 years old already. It's unbelievable.
he's like the UD of Miami Hurricanes football. And then you also, I mean, I don't anticipate Isaiah Walker starting, but I mean, I feel like he's definitely a name that you should definitely kind of keep in the conversation. But I feel like now we're kind of getting closer towards, I don't know, because in years past, it's just kind of felt like we've always had to jumble up like all these names and just kind of see, okay, let's try him at this position, let's try him over here. Now we're kind of like, okay, guys are a little more seasoned, guys are in better shape, and like what Brad mentioned, like the biggest thing you want at a position is competition. You know, like it's depth is important because everyone kind of breeds each other. You know, everyone kind of pushes each other because no one really is. They can see they're comfortable with having or locking up a starting position going into the season.
Yeah. Danny, chime in a little bit if you like there.
Yeah, well, I think when we looked at last season a little bit, sometimes the offensive line had some inconsistencies, and that made life tough for King at times. And look, there's going to be a lot of new faces and moving parts defensively, and spring ball is the time where you kind of work all of these kinks out. So as long as the offensive line is kind of gelling, I really do believe that the defense will be able to, kind of get their identity and get these new pieces to fit together. Now, if we're talking about this in the third week of August as training camp is in full swing, then I would be concerned, but I'm definitely encouraged by the growth of the offensive line, and I do think that the defensive line will eventually come together. And spring ball is the perfect time to kind of work these things out now, so that way you can go full steam ahead in August.
Brad, two things. Is this the most efficient use of moving the guys around on the offensive line with DJ Scaife going to right tackle, bringing it, Devon Donaldson over to right guard, things like that, and your take on the trenches just overall as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is probably the most efficient offensive line just because of two things, right? One, this is probably the deepest offensive line we've had in quite a while as far as quality depth, right? We don't have, no more of the Al Galmers and the Tommy Kennedys, some of the guys that literally just have a name on their back of their jersey and aren't really doing anything. We're literally 7 to 8 deep on the offensive line to where you can move a lot of these guys different places. I mentioned before with the wide receiver room how we have potentially 3 wide receivers that could play multiple positions. You look at the offensive line, it's the same thing. You look at a guy in Ja'Kai Clark who could play left guard or center. You look at someone like Scaife who could go guard or tackle. Another one in Donaldson and Jalen Rivers as well. So, I mean, when you look at the offensive line, I think it goes back to, the recruiting cycle the last 2 to 3 years, how well we've been able to recruit, especially in our own backyard. And then it goes to the developing, right? We finally have an offensive line coach that knows what he's doing, can actually, account for the talent that's on the roster and put them in the right positions possible, which is something that we weren't being able to do for the offensive line as well as developing, right? And then when you look at the defensive line, like you mentioned at the beginning, man, it's very hard to kind of expect what we've had the last 2 to 3 years where we've just had nothing but dominant presence, specifically on the outside, right? But our problem has always been the trenches. So how do you fix that problem? You bring in a coach that has already been at the University of Miami and has already proved that the trenches, specifically the defensive tackle position, is going to be a huge upgrade. Before Gerald Willis was Gerald Willis in a Miami Hurricane uniform, before RJ McIntosh and, Kendrick Norton were who they were, Jess Simpson brought the best out of those guys, put them in the right position possible to where if you were a 3 technique or a 4 technique, he made it very easy for you. The misguided blitzes where you would have a defensive end and a linebacker both on the same side, and you would kind of, crisscross right when the ball would snap and get that left tackle to kind of guess who he's going to block. Those are schemes and things that's going to be implemented right back into this defense. And that doesn't even mention to where when Manny was calling this defense and when Jess Simpson was the defensive line coach, not only was the defense as a whole and the defensive line aggressive, But our cornerback play, there was no lining 5 to 10 yards back on 3rd and 3. Everybody was 2 yards right on the line of scrimmage, playing bump and run coverage. Man, that's how Bandy and Malik Young and even a guy like Javonte Dean and D. Delaney, who weren't really the best corners, they got the job done because of the press man coverage and being able to play physical. And that's the type of defense we're going to get back to.
Yeah, speaking of that, and I know you mentioned a little bit recruiting, how we've been recruiting so well at the offensive line position. I kind of want to flip it over now and talk a little bit of recruiting in the sense that, look, we'll start off first. I know we've got a big decision tomorrow from one of our top prospects, but before we get to that, because I kind of want to end with that, recruiting-wise, right? The biggest concern still on the defensive side of the football, I think, is linebacker, with the exception of maybe Corey Flagg. And Fresh 3542 actually mentions it. This is great because this is exactly where I was going. Brad, maybe we'll start off with you on this one. Are the Canes expected, or maybe looking still at the transfer portal for some help at that linebacker position? Because I feel like, okay, yeah, we've got some young guys like Tyreek Austin Cave and Avery Huff and Sam Brooks, who Sam Brooks shows some good skills and looks like he could be, pretty good, but I still think we need help at the linebacker position. Is that somewhere they're going to look at the transfer portal for?
Absolutely. I would expect, if not one, possibly 2 linebackers in the portal. I know, even though, the rumors are out about, Henry Tutu going back to Tennessee, I know Miami has been specifically very heavily involved in that guy and kind of, waiting till, similar to the NBA trade deadline, right? Going to the last second until something, officially happens, with the Oladipo going to the Heat. That's a very similar situation with a guy like Henry Tutu. I know for a fact that there are guys on the staff that are still working on trying to get him as a Miami Hurricane, even though there are some rumors that he's going back to Tennessee. That's a name to look for. I know, Justin Flo, man, his name hasn't been mentioned in quite a while, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but who knows what happens after spring practice. I think that is a name to look for. As soon as spring ends, there's going to be a lot of, rumblings, not only on our own football team, but all around the country. So who knows if there are some other guys that maybe potentially Miami has their eye on that just hasn't hit the portal yet. So someone like him, and of course, Pai Gagliote as well. He obviously hasn't officially announced, so that's another name to go after. But all in all, I definitely think they need another linebacker. Like you mentioned, Corey Flagg seems like the only dominant guy out there. I know a guy like Sam Brooks is still a little banged up with a turf toe injury. And then some of our other linebackers just haven't stepped up yet, whether it be learning the playbook or just not getting fundamentally sound. All in all, I think what you're going to see is, depending on who we get in the transfer portal, if it's not someone we could depend on to start right away, you're going to see a lot of 2 strikers or multiple safeties on the field at once. Having Gilbert Frierson at striker along with Keyshawn Smith, possibly at that other outside linebacker position, bringing someone like Amari Carter inside as well, gaining a little bit more weight. And then, it makes up because you have guys like Avonte Williams, James Williams, Bubba Bolden, guys that could literally roam all around the football field.
And before we close things out, by the way, that's some really good stuff there on the linebacker position. I think you make a great point there. I think that we are going to see Keyshawn Smith on the field a lot at that striker / outside linebacker position, and some other guys. Before we end this, because we don't have a lot of time, but the biggest news is going to be the decision that 4-star quarterback Ja'Cory Brown is making tomorrow, making his commitment at 9:30 a.m. Picking between Miami, Texas A&M, Florida. Who else am I missing? Texas A&M, Florida. Who else? Miami.
I already know what the pick is, so it's like I've stopped caring about the other schools as well.
Whatever. Obviously, once he drops, right? Once he makes his commitment, because obviously, right, the word on the street is, word in the hood is that he is leaning towards Miami, making his commitment towards Miami. Really quick, in less than than a minute or so, just give me your take on Ja'Cory Brown and if he what you guys think if he picks Miami or not. Danny, we'll start with you on that one.
Miami has been had some very good luck with dual threat quarterbacks over the past couple of seasons. Brown is certainly a dual threat quarterback. I believe one of the other schools he's choosing from is Auburn. So Miami also has to compete with Auburn. But Brown would definitely bring that dual threat capability. He has a good arm. He can run, and I think he could definitely help Miami for the future and continue that trend of their quarterback.
Yeah, you got him. You got him picking Miami tomorrow. Yeah. Paul, what do you think?
I think he's picking Miami all the way just because of that. That visit to me was so interesting, just because he met with government officials that helped him turn around. That was I've never seen that before, and he's a high school kid. And I think that's kind of visit you set up for I don't know, a professional athlete or something. So I think Miami's the pick. It's a big get. If they officially land him, it's a big get, big arm. He's ideal size. And he's not fully polished as a passer yet, but he already has a lot where he's working with. That's the thing. I am excited to see what Lashley will do with him in a year or two. He's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I had Ja'Cory Brown along with Isaiah Bond and Colin Hurley on my show last night, and I definitely believe Ja'Cory's going to be picking Miami. I've been talking to him for the last couple of weeks, and the interesting about that, Paul, is that whole meeting that was set up with the chief officials and whatnot was actually all controlled by a 13-year-old young man by the name of Colin Hurley and his father.
He's a stud, Brad. He is a stud.
Telling you. So his father actually, so he's originally from Miami, and his father was a chief of police in Miami-Dade for over 25 years. Ended up actually being in the same, military service with Sean Taylor's dad, Pedro Taylor. Shout out to my boy as well. But yeah, man, it's a small world, and that was all actually done by Colin Hurley and his father. He took, Isaiah Bond and Ja'Cory Brown under his wing. And like they said, man, it's not a 4-year plan, it's a 40-year plan. And I expect Ja'Cory Brown to sign with Miami. And I expect a big snowball effect for not only guys in Georgia, but look out for some guys in Louisiana. Jordan Allen, next commitment right after Ja'Cory Brown. I'm calling.
Nice.
Eyes emoji.
I know, right? Paul's eyes light up when you say that. So, you know what? And I'm going to be honest with you, Brad. I can say this pretty confidently, especially after what you just kind of dropped there for me. Is Colin Hurley is going to be Miami Hurricane commit sooner rather than later. I can always put my money on that. And if you see the tape on him, and anybody who's listening now or who's going to listen later on the podcast, go watch tape on Colin Hurley. That 13-year-old, 14-year-old, whatever he is, 8th grader, is the real deal, fellas. I'm talking about he is a better passer right now than Ja'Cory Brown is. Okay, it's unbelievable out there. And then of course Isaiah Bond is just he's an absolute athlete. He's an absolute stud. So I can definitely see him going to Miami as well. Thank you guys for coming on. Obviously, Brad, also awesome. Thank you so much, Brad from Canes Insight. Talk to us a little bit about what you got going on your show and on the website and all that.
Yeah, man. So like you said, I'm a contributor with Canes Insight. I drop articles every now and then. I'm actually in the process of dropping a pretty much once the domino falls of Ja'Cory Brown, I'm going to give Cane fans, up to 20 to 25 recruits that are pretty much going to be up next on Miami's radar, position by position. And then every Wednesday night, we do a Canes Insight live show on YouTube, typically at 9 o'clock, where we bring on a current recruit that Miami's going after, talk to them a little bit about their life, background, break down some film with them. And then we'll also bring out some former players or former legends like Art Kehoe, Lamar Miller, and just a few others, Earl Little Sr. and Jr. as well. So we've had a lot of good guests.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, definitely check that out, guys. 9 p.m. on Wednesdays, the Canes Insight show on YouTube, and I'll obviously check out his work on canesinsight.com as well. Thank you so much again, Brad, for coming on the show. Danny and Paul, you guys were awesome. Make sure to check us out on 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Subscribe, click like, and also check out the podcast coming out shortly after this on any podcast platform that you guys use. Once again, thanks for following. Thanks for checking us out. The 6 Rings Canes will be back next week.
Luca to the U.
Luca to the U, baby.
To the U.